as on your icon. So I think, Dr. Munshi, you could do one thing. You can exit and then enter. I think then the camera, I think this problem may be solved.
I did not get you. What is the problem you were talking about?
Yeah, thank you. Now you're here. Now you're here. We can all see you now and hear you as well.
Okay, okay. I am audible and visible.
Yeah, you're both audible and visible.
Okay, okay.
Thank you.
So Professor Debray, please start. And I am requesting the technology subcommittee to start recording.
Okay, fine. Good afternoon to all of you present here virtually. First of all, I would like to convey my heartfelt thanks to the principal of this Narajole Raj College, and obviously would convey my special thanks to the head of the department of this college, and obviously Professor Milan Mondol and other members who are actively associated with this beautiful program. I'm really thankful to all of you to be that. I'm really that means thankful to all of you for inviting me on this beautiful platform. And whenever I have been invited, so I was trying to find out the syllabi of this, that means this college, and whenever I was trying to find out which topic I should choose and which would be suitable for the students to teach them. So the very first thing which occurred in my mind that I think I should choose partition literature. I think this is a very pertinent issues which today I will be focusing on, and I think each and everybody should understand the history of partition and the interesting literary devices which are quite instrumental in finding out the numerous voices of partitions, how it happened, and what is the impact of partition and the post-partition period. That are the most interesting things today I would like to cater to my students. Probably I'm trying to deliver this lecture focusing on the UG level students, obviously. So lots of issues I'll be talking about related to partitions today. The title which I have chosen for my discussion today is that, does border matter? Does border matter? And a brief overview on the partition literature. So the very moment when I'm uttering this word, that means does border matter? Obviously, I have just tried to utilize this border in a different way, because border is a word. If I am trying to bracket this particular word B, then there is a word which is called the order. So border is something which is referring to a kind of order. What kind of order I am talking about? It's a kind of order made by certain politicians. Whenever we are talking about the partition literature, that itself is indicative of a kind of the border which is generated by those who are making the policies, those who are in power especially. So here the border means a kind of geopolitical border. So this has been made, the politicians who are associated with the division of our country. So whenever India has got its freedom, that primarily formerly India was an undivided country. Lots of people, so many people, irrespective of caste, culture, and creed, used to live in this country. It's an undivided I did not get you. Milan, are you trying to say something?
Yes, sir. Actually, for the sake of customary, actually, it's our duty to introduce you. So we need actually 2 to 3 minutes from you.
I have already started. Then what should I do? Then should I hold or
Uh,
No,
yeah,
no, Dr.
please.
Dr. Munshi, I think we can do
yeah?
away with formalities for some occasions, and because you've started out so well, it would really be scandalous now if we ask you to hold on. So you can continue. We will do this introductory portion after you finish talking.
Yeah, yeah. I think that would be better. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay.
So, so after my discussion, then you can make me introduce to the students. Okay. So what I was trying to talk about is that there is a division. What kind of this is a division? It's a kind of the divisive policy engineered by the politicians who are associated with this kind of that fragmentation of our own country. And we know that this division is quite pathetic. It is the division of the mind of the common people. It is a division of the heart because people used to live in peaceful coexistence. There was no division in terms of religion, in terms of that means caste, culture, and creed. It's an undivided country. But we find that somehow one that means in 1947 on 15th August at midnight, we know that our country, that means India, has got its freedom, but it is a divided freedom. That means we have the two separate countries. One is India, another one is Pakistan. And this division has been made on the basis of religion. There was no religious that means distinction earlier, but all on a sudden people belonging to the both that means community, they can get to realize that there is a division. It has been generated all on a sudden, and what happened, it has created a kind of the distrust among the common people, and it resulted in the violence, and it has created a kind of volatile atmosphere, and has obviously mutilated the innocence of the common people, and it actually led to the utterly violent world. People were butchered during that time out of this religious fanaticism, the religious frenzy. This communal violence actually started, and because of this kind of distrust being generated, inoculated rather, or injected rather, into the minds of the common people by the certain politicians who were associated with the division of the country. On the one hand, we know that who has created the Muslim leagues, and the other hand the Indian, that means the Indian people. So we know there is a complete polarization was there that has been made on the basis of religion, and we can get to realize the pathetic condition. We can also have the similar division in the case of Pakistan as well. You know, the Pakistan has also divided in the East Pakistan and the West Pakistan, and West Pakistan means Pakistan, and the East Pakistan later on has been transmuted into the separate country, which is called the Bangladesh. So we know the liberation of the Bangladesh, which is completely based on the linguistic solidarity. That means on the basis of language. And we know that they are at almost 30 lakh people, Bangladeshi people have given their life for the sake of their own Bengali culture, their own languages. So there are lots of similarities between the Bengali culture of the Bangladesh and obviously the Hindus, those who are belonging to India at the same time. And we can have the numerous stories related to the partition, and where we find that how the out of this kind of religious bifurcation, so many people, so many Hindus were forced to migrate from Bangladesh to India, and so many Muslims were forced to migrate from India to that means this is Pakistan or the Pakistan at the same time. There are so many stories are there we can get to know later on. So we find that this is a kind of the division. This is the history of the partition, which is quite pathetic, and which is obviously has violated the innocence of the common people, has created a kind of the barrier, religious barrier. At the same time, in the case of liberation of Bangladesh movement, we know there is a that means the liberation from the clutches of the colonial language. That means the language which has that means Pakistan has tried to impose upon the Bangladeshi people. They have just tried to liberate from this kind of linguistic hegemony. in order to celebrate or anticipate their own cultural heritages. So this is on the basis of that means linguistic qualities. We know Bangladesh has brought us freedom movement in 1971. So this is the history of partition, which actually occurred in 1947. You know, Ananda Jahanare Kabir has said that this partition is merely a kind of the incident which actually occurred in 1947. Actually, it has created lots of ramifications, lots of that means divisions, and in the minds of the common people. Because after the announcement of this partition, there is the partition of Bangladesh, and we find there are lots of partitions. There are so many differences out there. There are so many divisions being made on the base. In the mind of the people. What kind of barriers we have? The barrier of caste, culture, creed, race, gender at the same time. So many issues are coming from here and there to determine the existence of the common people within any particular position. So there is no question of freedom. So there are lots of bifurcation, lots of divisions are going on in the entire that means countries. We know so many parts of our countries, not only in India but in America as well. Lots of ethnic riots are happening in the America. Who is considering them as nation of nations? But there are so many ethnic riots are happening in the America in America at the same time. So many things are happening in India as well. And in this connection, I would like to refer to Amartya Sen's famous book, Identity and Violence, where Amartya Sen has completely stated the plurality of concept, the plurality of monoculturalism, plurality of monoculture. That means monoculture means the singular cultures. So after the dismantling of this kind of that means the grand narrative of the history, we know that there are so many voices, not only the Hindus and Muslims, there are so many communities are living within our own country. Say, for instance, Gorkha, Janamukti Morcha, Rajbongshi communities, Namashudra communities, there's and so on and so forth. There are so many divisions there within their own country where they are just also striving to achieve their own attainment. That means their own goal. Their own goal is to postulate, to vindicate their existence on their own. So they are each and every culture are trying to celebrate their own voices. This is what is called the plurality of monocultures, and that is somehow creating a kind of the violence within the society at the same time. So not only the partition is related to the division of the country India, the Hindu and Muslims, there are lots of partitions that are going on here and there right now in the present time as well. And we know I have thought that I should discuss. I can take certain cues from. I think you might have read Robert Frost's poem. I can take cues from the Robert Frost famous poem Making World. I think you might have read the poem, and it's a beautiful poem where it's a dramatic monologue, I should say, in this connection, where we find there is a speaker and another one is she or he is made to speak by the poet. Is that there is two dialogue going on throughout the entire poem. One is there is something that doesn't love the world, and on the other hand, another person says that good fences make good name. So there is something that doesn't love the world. When speaker says, it has complete connotation of dismantling any cartographical epistemology or the geographical border. Because in partition, two things are quite important. One is history, and there is the geography. So we know that he is talking about the that means demolition of any geographical barrier. He is talking about that there should not be any kind of any difference. It is much more anthropocentric, much more humanitarian, I should say. On the other hand, it is being said that good fences make good neighbor. That means there are certain legal issues that are associated with this concept. That yes, I think there should make a kind of that means the wall, which is completely coming from the legal aspects of life, legalities of our society. So here we find that this is the kind of that means binary going on. On the one hand, anthropocentrism, that means love for people, humanitarian aspects. On the other hand, certain that rules and regulations, legal aspects of life. And Robert Frost is also a human lover, is a person who is very much entrenched into, whose root is very much entrenched into the common people, into the common man. We know he always speaks for them, and here we can have this kind of glimpse as well. But if we try to scoop these particular things from this, that means limited world, that means she is talking about a particular person and his neighborhood. But if we take this concept from here and have tried to imply, that means apply it to the context of this nation building and the division of the nation, we can get to realize that how this is also relevant in the present day condition at the same time. We know that how the people are quite, lots of people, the politicians are instrumental in making the divisions by creating a kind of the barrier, or by creating a kind of the barbed wire in order to make a division. They might have certain, that means, intentions to serve their own purpose. Probably that's why they have made that, because earlier it was an undivided country. And on the other hand, we know that there are certain people, that means, who were actually associated with the liberation of the common people, with the common man's understanding, with the anthropocentric or the anthropomorphic aspects of life. This is another interesting things. And we know there are lots of poets, there are lots of novelists, partition novelists, who have actually tried to raise those voices, where they are trying to condemn this kind of religious fanatics, this kind of religious polarizations, or the identity politics, which is emanating from the race, culture, gender, so on and so forth. So they are just trying to dismantle this kind of polarization of self and other, and obviously they are trying to speak of a kind of, that means, the amelioration of people, breaking down this kind of sectarian attitude, which is just coming from all sorts of aspects of the society. And they are very much anthropocentric. And in this connection, I think I should obviously talk about that there are so many writers, in the name of so many writers, Amitabh Ghosh, Jhumpa Lahiri, Bapsi Siddha, and Kushban. So many other writers, they are quite, to name a few, they are quite instrumental in talking about this kind of the anthropocentric and anthropomorphic aspects of life. And there are certain issues, rather, I should say, in this connection, which are associated with this, that means this literature of the partition. And the first important thing which I'm going to focus on is that the concept of homemaking. This is another important thing, because my title is Does Border Matter, which is also related to a kind of the cartographical epistemology, and also the dismantling of this kind of cartographical epistemology. And we know the concept of home. I know this concept. I will give all sorts of answer after the end of my discussion of this. We know that whenever I'm talking about this homemaking, this home is a very important concept, and so far as the partition literature is concerned. And here we find that how home is being made, how there is having like how importance is has been given on the part of the society to make this homemaking. I think this homemaking is a very important context, because home is nothing but a kind of the imaginary concept. Home, it is a kind of the geopolitical border being generated by those who are in power. But is there any, that means, connecting this geopolitical aspects and this, that means the home which is being made on the basis of imagination or emotion? So we find that there is a that means there is a character in Amitabh Ghosh's novel, whose important character, whose name is Thamma, and Thamma is very much prone to focus on this map, because she, after the partition, she was forced to come to her own, that means Calcutta or Kolkata right now, from Dhaka, or Dhaka, Dhaka is being said. and she has her own, that means her own emotion associated with Dhaka, because it is her birthplace. Obviously, an emotional affiliation was there with Dhaka. And we find that how she is very much absorbed in this particular, that means maps, or this map becomes quite important to her. And we find that she is trying to meticulously trying to find out the lines, the drawing lines on this particular, that means map, and she's trying to find out that is there any, that means significance of these drawing lines. And she's also asking other people if she wants to go to Dhaka by plane. Would she be able to find out this kind of lines on them? Or that means probably loitering here and there. And the obvious answer is that no, probably won't be able to find it. But it has been generated by, that means by the government of other states and those who are actually in power. So there is no question of any kind of any border. And she feels also that home is very much a kind of the imaginary thing. It's an imaginary place. And she is also trying to create her home within home by resorting to her imagination, her own emotion. So, in this connection, I would like to mention that the important book written by Akhtar, and the name of the book is Cartographies of Diaspora. When it is being says that home is nothing but a kind of desire, which is called the homing desire. So, this desire probably drives him to make her to remember her home within Calcutta or Kolkata. So she is always absorbed in tinkering or making her home within her own home culture. And it is actually coming from this partition or separation from her own culture. So this lack probably, which is very much in Cartographies of Diaspora, the name of the book which I've mentioned right now, and where we find that there's a home on the one hand, on the other hand, there is the homing desire, and we know that this desire probably drives her mind to make himself associated with her, that means former home which he has left. So it has created a kind of lack at the back of her mind. Probably that lack has helped her create this kind of ambience within her own space, that means Kolkata at the same time. If we cast our vision, if we cast our vision from this particular text to another important text, and the name of the text, that means the stories, is When Mr. Pirzada Came to Dine, written by Jhumpa Lahiri. This is a beautiful story where we also find that how border has been given importance later on, because the entire story is set against the background of the partition move, that means the liberation of Bangladesh in 1971, where we know that came to where we have come to know that Mr. Pirzada is a person belonging to the Bengali culture. He is coming from India, South Asian country. He has come to that means England in order to pursue his degree. But the fellowship, whatever he has actually taken from the government, that is quite meager to sustain her life. And the thing is that after meeting with the character, that means the lady character, the innocent child whose name is Lilia, their family, he becomes one with this particular family members, because they are also Bengali. They have also that means the Lilia, the narrator of this particular story, whose father and whose parents are also belonging to the Bengali culture. So there is a kind of the cultural solidarity generated between Mr. Pirzada and her parents. That means the first generation immigrants. And Lilia also belonging to the second generation immigrants. So she is looking at the entire thing from a distance, and she is trying to look at the entire family from a point of view, some unique or that means the unipolar point of view, from a singular point of view. That means there is no difference she finds between Mr. Pirzada and her parents. They ate the same food, they laughed at the same jokes, So all these things are going on, and she has a close affinity or the affection with for this person, that means Pirzada, and she has a great, that means, friendship with this person as well. And I think you should remember that the narrator, this Lilia, is a 10 years, that means, daughter. It's a 10 years, that means a person, that means a lady, but a child who is of 10 years old. So we find that from this particular aspects of child belonging to second generation, she is describing the entire things. But all on a sudden, she gets to realize that after the partition movement, it is being said by her parents that she should not maintain, their family should not maintain a relationship with this person, that means Mr. Pirzada. So there is a religious bifurcation, there is a division, but that particular girl was confused with this kind of, that means, things. In 1971, whenever it was broadcasted on the radio, and then after that, she gets to realize there, but it has been injected into her mind that it is not possible for her to meet this person, that means Pirzada. So she did not even understand what is going on. So that means I'm talking about from this particular perspective, obviously on the basis of, that means, the place, on the basis of location, we know that the location becomes a very much, that means it is completely created. As I was talking about when I'm discussing the condition of Dhamma, we know that location becomes a kind of the very poorest things. It is being created, it is being engineered by that means those who are in power. Here we find the similar things. And she feels that there is no distinction between her parents and this particular person called Mr. Pirzada. So we find that they are actually leading a same life, same cultures they are performing, the Bengali cultures performing at home. And Lilia is getting much more confused regarding this kind of bifurcation, regarding this kind of separation. And she was thinking about that. How is it possible? Why they are doing all these things? Because she was innocent. So we know how this innocence mind was violated by means of the intrusion of this kind of, that means, religious fanaticism. So this is an identity politics going on, and that is why this lady is also shocked at the news of this kind of things, that she won't be able to meet, and this person won't be able to come to their home. So it's quite pathetic. That means it's a kind of that is separation. Separation. It's a kind of the mental agony which she had to undergo during that particular time as well. So in this particular connection, I would like to refer a theorist whose name is Sarah Ahmed. Sarah Ahmed, in her book Cultural Politics of Emotion, has stated that there is a, that means, the emotion has been ingeniously put, has been put in such an image that there is a division between your own individual body and the social body. And your social, that means individual body, is regulated by the social norms and regulations. Your body is nothing but the inscription of the social rules and regulations. So that means you are passive. So your body is bound to submit yourself to the will of the social taboos. So here we find that Lilia has to go through the same similar situations. Her body, in spite of her unwillingness, is bound to submit to the will of the social taboos, social regulations. And we know similarly is that whenever these regulations you are trying to break down, then there is a difficulties coming in the life of people. Then there is a violence. There is a that means violence is going on during that. But if they are not following up this kind of rules and regulation, and it happens in the case of Dhamma. If we turn over the pages of the shadow lines, we can have that. Whenever Dhamma is went to Bangladesh in 1946, in 1964 probably, this particular idea of going to Bangladesh in order to show our own, in order to that means interact with our own past, that means culture, past, that means the where she was actually born. Whenever she went that out of emotions, she did also went to her. But she did not even think of this kind of division. But whenever Tridip became the victim of this kind of partition, of this riot, and she had to sacrifice her life, then she gets to realize that yes, there is a limitation, there is a separation, and this separation has been generated on the basis of religion. So this is the kind of the concretization of border has been made on the basis of performing religious rituals, and this religious frenzy, this religious fanaticism is going on, and that's why actually it becomes the victim of this kind of riot that occurred in 1964. And it concretizes the border again and again, this violation. And this is coming from the communal frenzy, the communal frenzy people. So we know again that this is the border which is also created by man. And similarly, if we also look at the beautiful stories written by Saddam Hussein Manto, Tobatek Singh, here we also find that in the asylum, how the insane people belonging to the both communities, all on a sudden, it has been broadcast on the radio that the country is going to separate on the basis of religion. And what is the condition of their mind? We can naturally feel, we can naturally imagine the condition of that common people. That means common people means this insane people belonging to this asylum. And we also get to realize that how Saddam Hussein Manto is trying to vituperate, criticize this kind of religious bifurcation, this kind of, that means the division actually the country is trying to make in this particular, those who are in power, they are trying to make in this particular connection. So we find that how this is the kind of the division being made, and we know that it has been decided that Muslims, fanatics, Muslim insane people belonging to the Muslim community, they should be sent to Pakistan, and the insane people belonging to the Hindu community, they should be sent to India. But the character here, the Bishan Singh, she is not ready to go anywhere climbing up on a tree. So we can get to know that here how he is trying to dismantle this kind of border, concretization of the border based on the religious, which appears to them no meaning. And at the end of his life, he has tried to fight against this kind of bifurcation. She did not want to go anywhere. And we know how she is going against this kind of, has tried to go against this kind of, that means cartographical epistemology. So all the three stories which I have tried to discuss in the light of this kind of homemaking or kind of cartographical epistemology, it becomes quite clear that all these characters, they have a kind of the transnational nuances. They have tried to go beyond the already given existence of this particular world. They are just trying to get out of it and trying to create their existence. But the societal pressures, that is why I have talked about, which Sarah Ahmed has talked about in Cultural Politics of Emotion, that there is a kind of the societal divisions, but societal, that means the norms and regulations are incumbent upon, that means the people belonging to both communities in such a way that they won't be able to get out of it. So Manto here probably has tried to talk about these insane people are not at all insane. Insanity is coming from the institution, the institutions, that means those who are actually manipulating the society. So that means the power is coming from the infinity, that means the insanity is actually coming from on the part of them. They, by creating this kind of border, by creating a kind of the vicious atmosphere, by creating a kind of the, that means the Mephistophelian aspects, or in this way, so they are actually trying to make this kind of barrier division. So it has resulted in a kind of the violation we can get to know in this particular connection as well. Another important thing is, which I am trying to focus on, is that the borderlessness, as I mentioned, that displacement. And whenever I am talking about the concept of displacement, so the most interesting thing is that the concept of, the most interesting thing which comes in our mind is the concept of hospitality. So we find that the concept of displacement is very much attuned to the formation of hospitality as well. Because we know lots of people were displaced, were bound to displace from their own root to the roots, the other country. And this displacement was made on the basis of religion, we know. And we know that this is how the refugee community has been constituted across the border. And in this connection, that how this hospitality is at work. That hospitality, according to Kant in his book, that means the perpetual peace, it is being said that hospitality is actually coming from that means the nation. Whenever a person belonging to different country is coming to is that means is another country, coming is going to another country. So the very moment that what happens, that particular country is showing their hospitality towards the stranger, and they can live there. But whenever they are trying to establish their that means existence in that particular country, then the problem arises. So in perpetual peace is very much premised upon the certificates, all other that means legal documents, which are very much vital in order to prove one's own that means existence within the society. So you have to prove your own, you have to show your own identity card, you have to show your other required documents in order to validate your existence within the society. Because the society is very much economically, politically engineered by the nation, that means the sovereign power, those who are in power. And later on we find that how this is the monolithic condition of economically engineered society, which is very much stricted upon, which is very much handled by a kind of the sovereign power, that has been dismantled when Derrida has brought in the concept of that means unconditional hospitality, which is very much premised upon the human sympathies or the humanitarian aspects of life. And we know later on, Shaila bin Habib is another theorist, as a philosopher, in her book, another cosmopolitanism, has talked about democratic iteration, by who is completely inspired by Derrida's concept of unconditional hospitality, and where he stated that how this iteration of language, the iteration of this language, caste, culture, and creed, because in globalization there is a kind of the assimilation of culture. So there would be a kind of the performance of various cultures. They will be performing their own ritualistic cultural social group, and there would be no kind of any barrier. That means the political and religious and any kind of any barrier. There should not be any kind of any border, and they should be hospitable unconditionally. So these are the things she is trying to put, and that would be the kind of the cosmopolitan world where people can live peacefully, and there would not be any kind of this kind of surveillances. But she is talking about this kind of, that means people-driven hospitality. And Derrida has talked about this people-driven hospitality, and she is also talking about this kind of people-driven hospitality that would give us the direction of another cosmopolitanism, which Shaila bin Habib has talked about. But during the time of partition, what we find that whenever the displaced people are coming from one particular state to another, so there we find that lots of people taking shelter in Kolkata and the Shialda stations at the same time. How they are leading their life, we can get to realize so many things. There are so many stories are there, and we know that what is the condition of these displaced people. So we know that if any person belonging to another community, if by mistake she or she comes to passing the barbed wire, what is the condition of that particular person? She might she had to go through so many trials and tribulations if he comes by mistake or with any intention comes to a country. So it's a kind of any people a person goes to another country. So for instance, Bangladesh or other, so they had to go through this kind of similar situation. So each and every country, there is a kind of the stranger. That means the conception of stranger is at work. A conception of making the stranger becomes another important things which actually being created because of this kind of hospitality. So it is another important thing, that means that hostility which I have referred to in this connection, that is also important in aspects so far as this particular partition literature is concerned, that how on the one hand there are the legal aspects which is talking about a kind of, that means the government engineered society where you have to show your that means card to prove your existence. On the other hand, the another cosmopolitanism where it is democratic iteration, when it says that, which is somehow related to the unconditional hospitality. There should not be any kind of any border, and it is very much premised upon the humanitarian or the anthropocentric, anthropomorphic aspects of life. This is the most important thing which I have tried to. That again, there is a kind of dialectic going on in this particular connection as well. So another important thing which is quite relevant to in this particular connection is that the conception of power. The conception of power is important because it lies in the art of representation. We know the histories of partitions is a kind of, that means it cannot be kind of the monolithic histories. And there are so many voices, numerous voices, which have been battered, which have been subjugated during that time. Because we find that Amitabh Ghosh has also talked about that silence is talking about a kind of the gap between word and the word. So he says that it lies in the art of representation. There is a wide disparity between the, there is a that means the meaning would be created well proportionate way if there is a combination between the world of experience and the art of representation. So we know that this is the kind of the stereotypical relationship probably Amitabh Ghosh has tried to talk about, because we know in Edward Said's Orientalism, we know that we find that how this kind of the stereotypical relationship was generated during that particular time. And we can also get to realize that this the Western mythologies, the Western countries, the people, the Western metaphysics, how has created a kind of this bifurcation. We know the Occident culture always trying to represent the Orient, and the Orient, whenever they have come into contact with them, and we can refer to in this connection the beautiful story of Curse, that how in the name of educating them, how he is trying to rob of their tenderness, generosity, by imposing his own colonial rules and rituals in a very, that means when articulated way, by means of the ideology, by it's a kind of the repression, it's a kind of the repression. Althusser says that ideological, it's a kind of the IS factor, ideological state apparatus. When you are not utilizing repression, physical repression, you are always trying to inculcate in their minds your own ideology in such a way they won't be able to get out of your own ideology, what you are trying to put in their mind. So they are also interpolated into the colonial subject. So in this way, there is a kind of the bifurcation going on. And we know that how this Orient, these blacks or the non-whites rather, they won't be able to express their own voices. And Spivak has also termed it as called epistemic violence. That means violence is coming from knowledge. It is completely about the misrepresentations of the Orient, completely talking about the misrepresentations of the non-whites or the that means the blacks at the same time. So herein lies the art of representation. But right now it is being said that that means the Orient should come up with their own voices in order to create their own history. The self-writing has been started in this particular connection, which is being made. So art of representation, what I am trying to mean, is actually ingeniously created by means of the colonizers or those who are in power in order to validate their existence forever, so that colonizers will be dominating the Orient, or that means belonging to the non-white and the black cultures, they should be dominated by them down the ages. But it should not be so. In the present day context, we know how they are just trying to get out of this kind of colonial stupor in order to create their own existence on their own by writing their own stories, by writing their own oral histories. So that is the differences that has been created. So Amitabh Ghosh here in this connection says that the silence lies in the gap between word and the world. That means that means the how the voices belonging to the marginalized community, and especially the women, how their voices are being subjugated with repressed, and these discontinuous histories that have been given an extra push by him, so that this history should come to the limelight and can create their world on their own. So that is a new historical understanding. It can be made on this particular ground as well, where the each and every the ethnic communities or the non-white communities, they can raise their own voices by toppling this kind of, that means the colonial ideology, colonial historiography. At the same time, we know in where in the shadow lines, Amitabh Ghosh has also referred that how during 1960, when the riot is going on between the Hindu and Muslims, these incidents, that means were not given so many importance. Only the sporadic incidents have been given importance by the mainstream medias. Rather, they are focusing on the Indo-Chin relationship. So all the histories, these discontinuous histories, should be given importance, which Amitabh Ghosh felt, and lots of post-Rusdian period writers or the post-colonial writers, they are thinking of doing this job, and they are successfully doing it. And in this case, we know that how Amitabh Ghosh has just tried to raise the voices of the repressed section of the society. And we know that this is what is called the art of representation, which is completely power politics, which is completely focused on the kind of the power politics. As I have said, that epistemic violence, which is being conducted by those who are in power. So right now we know that how those who are belonging to the repressed section of the colonized, they are trying to raise their own voices. And we know that in location of culture, it is being said that it is being said that how this, that means that the same margin is trying to create their own voice on their own. So there should not be any kind of any polarization. That center will be writing their history, come out from this colonial stupor, and they can create their history on their own. So these marginalized histories are just trying to come out from this particular periphery at the same time. There should not be any kind of any border. And Salman Rushdie has also talked about in Imaginary Homeland that there is a division in between the Commonwealth literature and the British literature. It is also a kind of art of representation that has created a kind of the bifurcation, partition between the Commonwealth literature, that is so many literatures, vernacular literatures are there, which is who are utilizing their own cultures, oral cultures, their own languages, but they are expressing all this in English, but they are expressing it on their own. This is not they are trying to copy exactly like that of that they should be exactly like that of the Englishman. So there is a difference, and it has been created by the English people at the same time, and this, that means division, has been made very ingeniously on the part of them. So we find this at the difference. This is the partition going on that is completely dependent on the art of representation, which is quite important in this particular connection, because how this partition, post-partition stories are also given importance to come out to the limelight, which were hidden. So we know that silences should be given a voice in this particular connection at the same time. Another important thing which is also related to the power structure is that the sovereign power and the nation-state ideology. So we know there is a difference. One is the nation. Nation is the kind of the cultural product, and nation-state is nothing but a kind of the political concept. We know nation and the nationalism is quite related, and nationalism is also a kind of that means certain ideologies which is completely based on the performances of that means the common people belonging to any particular country. Say for instance, one's own national culture, national anthem, national bird, national fruit, all these things are creating a kind of the synergistic impulse into the mind of the common people that would probably concretize the border of, that means the concept of nationalism, which is related to nation. So this negritude, nationalism, all these things are very much associated, which is actually talking of one's own culture, in order which would probably help them to show off their own particular cultural ethos, which is related to his own culture. This is what is called the nationalism. And later on we will talk about this, how this nationalism is also creating a kind of the border as well. And it is being said that still now in Wagha Atari border, where we find that how that these two cultures, that means these two people belonging the Hindu and Muslim, they're uniting all together in front of the barbed wire, and individually, with their battle groups, they are trying to show off their own cultural ethos by hosting their own flags and lowering down their flags. So we find that it also concretizes a kind of the national border. It also is, that means they are performing their own cultural balance, but how it creates a kind of the bifurcation, or rather I should say concretizes a kind of the border, which Ishamanan has also talked about in this connection as well, that it concretizes a kind of the national border. So it becomes quite important. So again, by means of the cultural performances that means of both community, that they are just again trying to create any kind of any border in this connection. So it is coming completely sponsored by that means by the governments, and it is referring to a kind of the nationalistic atmosphere, and this is also creating a kind of the bifurcation, or really that means between these two community at the same time. And we know that how the sovereignty is coming from. So sovereignty is very important concept, because if we go by the sovereign power, we know that in classical period there is nothing called the sovereignty, because a king was in a position to exercise his own power upon the common people. So that is completely coming from his own being, his own rituals. This is somehow related to the formation of the sovereign power, which belongs to him, which is being occupied by him. But this sovereign power has actually lost its position in modern period, because we know in modern period that man has been given importance. Thomas Hobbes and John Locke, they are obviously talking about a kind of this sovereign power, a kind of this nation-state ideology, a kind of this sovereignty, because they feel that that means the particular person who, by implementing social, communal, political, religious affiliation, but by imposing upon the common people, they would deprive the people in terms of economy, in terms of culture. So this is a kind of the division was there in the mind of the people that was handled by those those who are in power. But that sovereignty has been smashed on the ground by when the modern nation state, that means modern nation state ideology is talking about. That means the modern nation state ideology is referring to what modern nation state ideology is referring to. Modern state nation state ideology is talking about the common people, the condition of the common people. So we know Agamben in this Foucault has also talked about this kind of the sovereign power, and where the people, common people, which is Agamben has made a difference, that Zoe and the bios and police, so all these things I'll be talking about, that the condition of the common people is there, that is very much part and parcel of the political life. And we know that means the police. So the common people is, Zoe means the common people. It's a kind of state which is referring to the condition of the common people, and bias is a kind of the state which is referring to an individual, community and group, which is also belonging to the Zoe, but is also belonging to the that means the police as well. We know certainly that Zoe has taken an important role in the domain of police. That means this is nothing but politicization of the common people. But Agamben says that the individual, community and group, which I am trying to mean here, the refugee communities, whenever they are coming from other places, they don't have their own identity card, and we know that what amount of sufferings they had to undergo whenever they are interacting with the others belonging to other communities. They had to change their name, they had to do so many things, so on and so forth was happening. They were forced to convert. So all these things were happening depending on this religion. So the refugees, they are very much product of the bare life, according to them. I mean, that means the bias, the individual community, they are actually these refugees who are belonging to the bare lives or this bias, they are stripped of their own voices, all amenities of life, and we find that how they have transmuted into a kind of the bare life. So this is the way that the people belonging to the marginalized or the refugee community, they have lost their own voices, and we know that how this expurgation going on in America. We know that this is a kind of the another sort of xenophobic atmosphere being made on the part of Donald Trump in 2017, where it is being completely stated that Muslims should be banished from their own country. So it's a kind of the xenophobic atmosphere where they are considered as the bare bodies, and they should, that means mutilate, they should just that means they should just separate from their own country. They should be separated from their own country, that means American state. So here we can find the so many issues, and so many issues are coming in the well debated issues in CAA and RC, probably is there. So we also find that how these legal aspects of life are trying to make them, that means the bare life, because they are under the surveillance. It is being said they are free, but they are very much under the surveillance of the society, that means the government. So this is the enslaved condition they have been going through, and where they have been reducing their own voices. So it is quite pathetic for them, where they have to show there are so many legal issues and so many barriers again and again coming from various aspects of life. And this is always creating again a kind of the concretization of the border, where the humanitarian aspect is barely valued. So we can naturally understand the condition of, that means this this particular condition of this, that means the bare bodies. And in this connection, I would like to refer to the condition of, that means that Vishin Singh, who is actually belonging to the Dobatik Singh, the character, who is nothing but going against this kind of biopolitics. He's trying to go against this kind of biopolitics. Thamma is also trying to go against this kind of biopolitics. And we find that at the end of the story, we know that how this protagonist of the Tobatik scene is not ready to go anywhere else. And he is, in the words of Agamben, I should say, he is a kind of, that means is acting almost like a muscle man, as stated by Agamben, that it's a kind of the living death experiences. That was lost a kind of the crisis, but still he is actually trying to, that means, exalt his own experience, trying to vindicate his own experience in spite of going through this kind of sufferings, pangs and emotions, pangs and sufferings at the same time. So he is trying to authenticize his own experiences, and his cry at the end of the day, he is going against this kind of biopolitics, that he is the victim of this biopolitics. There should not be any kind of separation between there should not be any kind of concretized border between the countries, and they should go beyond that. They should create a different sort of consensus, which is very much catering to the needs of the common people, or that should go by the humanitarian aspects of life. That is the basic motto of this discussions of, that means, the writer as well. So another important thing is that that means the condition of the women. We can get to know how that means the women were marginalized, and women were marginalized in this androcentric society, and how they were abducted, and while they were abducted, how they were misused or raped by this abducted people at the same time. Those who were abducting, how they have raped. This is also another sort of story. So I would like to refer to in this connection the that means the beautiful that means writer, the Urvashi Bhutalia. In her book, The Other Side of Silence, we know that how she is trying to utilize this word called silence. We find it is quite difficult for persons who are actually who are the victims of this kind of, that means, word, or of this kind of battle, religious battle. For those who are victim of this religious battle, it is quite impossible for them for that means it is actually quite difficult to come to find out answer on their part that what actually happened, because there is a kind of so many moralities are there, so many stigmas are associated with her life, with her personal life. So probably certain section, those who are not ready to express the whatever things they had to go through, they had experience during the confrontation, and certain people, certain, that means the characters, certain people, amount of people who were trying to express their voices. That is what is going on there. So that means the Smriti, that means the memories, the horrific memories which are associated during this kind of, that means, the battle. What are the experience they have gone through? That they actually trying to, certain people trying to omit, and certain, and that means this memory somehow it depends on that means the person how he would express it. how he or she would express it in front of the others. So whenever we are talking about the archival of this Holocaust, that these memories associated with this kind of Holocaust or this kind of partition, archiving of this partition, it is quite difficult, and it also depends on the ethical aspects. So for instance, I am trying to interview with a person who is the victim of that situation, of this war. So how far it would be ethical on my part that I would be make I will try to make him or her bound to express what actually happened, what amount of pressure I can give to her. So it becomes quite difficult in that means in collecting the stories, the anecdotes which are associated with this culture. So Urvashi Butalia is trying to do this, and she is talking about this kind of silence. That silence is there, and she actually is trying to find out the voices of the women, especially those who remain silent and who were made to silent, and she is actually trying to that means dismantle this kind of colonial torpor, and rather trying to give push the battered condition of the women so that they should come to the limelight. And I know that the autobiography of baby Haldar, she has written the autobiography of baby Haldar, and baby Haldar is a woman who is getting married out of pressure from the society during at the age of 12, and she actually produced a child at the age of 14 that will be followed by two other children, and later on we find that how she actually that means aborted this relationship with her abusive husband, and later on we find that how she has that means spent her valuable times in library and took taken her pain to write her history in her own language. And later on, we find that this autobiography was translated by this lady, that is the Urvashi Butalia, in order to break the silence looms large in the terrifying world of that means androcentrism, the patriarchy. So she is trying to dismantle this kind of prolonged silence, rather try to give an extra push then to come to the limelight so that they can express their own voices on their own. So we find this how this silence is has been made to break by the writer Urvashi Butalia in this particular connection as well. And there are so many stories. I would like to mention two or three. Then you can get to how the women were getting liberated. If we go by Manik Bandyopadhyay's story, The Final Solution, we find it is completely a kind of the deviation of Gandhian philosophy. So Gandhi actually stated that women body is considered to be a kind of the purified object. So any woman is attacked by any kind of any people, that is getting raped by another people. So that moment that lady should commit suicide by taking poison. So that was his principle, because he is talking about a kind of the passivity. He demands a kind of the passivity on the part of the woman. So here we find how the Manik Bandyopadhyay has tried to break down this kind of passivity. Rather, he has actually portrayed a kind of the radical character, woman character called Mullika. And Mullika is a lady who has taken the sole responsibility for the sustenance of her own family, because her husband has been suffering from illness. Her two children were there, and she knows it very well that she has to take the entire responsibility of her family. And that's why she is also ready to accept the challenge offered to her. And that what was the challenge? She has that is actually going against the androcentric world. What is the challenge? This is called the prostitution. She has resorted to prostitution in order to earn money for the sake of her family members. She did not think about any of the moral aspects of the society. And we know the Promotho is a vile character who always tried to possess that lady, and before going to prostitution, or the Promotho is a character, is a representative character of the male-centric society, who is actually in the name of giving her a job, he is actually trying to possess her sexually, and we know how she reacted to that wild personality, how readily she actually killed that particular person by her knife And we find that how radically that woman character, Mallika, is trying to create her own voices, trying to create her own position by dismantling this kind of silence, this kind of passivity, which has been imposed upon the women in general. So she is the representative character who is trying to find out her own position within this that means the patriarchal society, and he is trying to break down this kind of conventional norms. In Epar Ganga, Opar Ganga, written by Jyoti Moididi, where we also find how the woman is getting killed, is getting raped, and how they do respond to the society, how she is not accepted in her own family, and how she has gone to other place to join as a lecturer. So we know again, this kind of the story is how these characters, these women characters, they are coming from this kind of colonial hangover in order to validate their own experiences at the same time. And can get to realize. The Samaresh Bosu story is on the Posharini, how in the that means refugee-dominated area, the Pushpawala, there is a character who has actually tried to sell her handmade dolls. So we find that how the women are not limited their own expression or their own position to this, so to say, the 3 inches of ivory, Jane Austen says. Rather, they are trying to come out from this kind of 3 inches of ivory. They are just trying to express their own voice. So, on the one hand, we know that partition has actually mutilated the women, has actually robbed off their everything. But we find that how after partition, the post-partition period, how these women are also getting their own voices. They are trying to postulate their existence on their own, in order to validate their existence in the eyes of society, rather the patriarchal society. So these are the interesting things we have just tried to focus on the condition of the women and how they're just trying to get out of it. Another important thing is that the mode of communication. We know that how they were, that means the people are actually just coming whenever they were just displaced, how they are going. They may go through aeroplane, they may go through foot, by their foot, or through train, and train becomes the mode of target, persons belonging to the both community. We know it very well, because we know that the train, majority of people used to actually sit and coming, and that's why lots of train were burned. A train becomes a very much important metaphor as the novelist is concerned. Lots of incidents politically happen here and there where train becomes the target of, that means, the religious fanatics, the fundamentalists at the same time. Lots of people have given their lives in this particular connection as well. So these are the entry into Pakistan. We can have the similar scenario at the same time. So there are lots of stories, anecdotes are there associated with the stories of this partition, and we know how it has actually created a kind of the violence. So we know that this is a kind of the violence. So say for instance, if a Hindu kills a Muslim, then that particular point of time the Muslim would kill a Hindu. So it is actually a kind of the violence that is going on, and this violence is coming from sacredness. Say for instance, I'm giving one example in this connection that would that would help you to understand all these things, the concept of sacredness and violence. Say for instance, the conception of Ram Mandir, that is somehow related to the sacredness, because Ram Mandir is the epitome of sacredness. But the very moment, do you even think that the sacredness of this Ram Mandir is completely associated, or the protection of this Ram Mandir is completely associated with the violence? Because in order to protect this sacred place, Hindu peoples are creating a kind of the violence, they're killing Muslims. Or if the Muslim people is trying to protect their own, that means mosque, they are making, that means creating kind of the violence by killing the Hindus. So this is nothing but a kind of, Renegade says this, that the mimetic violence. This is a kind of the mimetic violence going on between the communities that has resulted in a kind of the mutilations and has created a kind of the communal frenzy of the violences that created especially a kind of the vicious atmosphere in this connection as well. And we know that lots of movies have also been made on this particular ground. There are so many movies I would like to mention here. The Shankhochil, as directed by Gautam Ghosh, Raj Kahinis. There are so many stories are there. And especially, I would like to refer to Shankochi in this particular connection. And we know that how that particular, that means the character, the Prashanjit is acting over there. And we know that character, the Prashanjit, we used to teach that means his son, that means his daughter Rupsha, whose name, and they are. We know that there is a Ichamoti river, and and beyond this Ichamoti, there is a kind of the barbed wire, and nobody can get out of it. And only these Shankochils, this bird, and these rivers, that these birds can go out of it and they can enter into it. And this innocent mind, this child is looking at this birds, and that means and he had a talk with her father, that is, these birds are free to go anywhere else. They can go outside the border, they can come inside the border. This Ichamoti river is also, as there is no barrier, he can go here and there. So we almost like but we are here somehow confined to this particular space. That is the lamentation going on. And the worst condition you can also have in this particular movie is that whenever that particular girl has been suffering from a disease, she is made to go, she is bound to go to India, and where we find that how she was bound to, that means, change her name, and how that means the identity crisis is coming from here and there, how we know that nation is getting the inhospitable to the strangers at the same time. So we can naturally imagine that how these borders are actually made by that means the strategies, the politicians, and how there is a division being generated because that how these fanatics did not could not understand this kind of division. We people, those who were belonging to this undivided India, they did not even think of it. So this is a kind of the religious bifurcation that was going on, and that has been projected in the stories at the same time. So there are so many stories. I'm not going to give the names of this. That means the films, and this films is very much related to the dismantlations or the disruption of this border. That's why I have utilized it in the name of this particular films. And in a nutshell, at the end of my discussions, I'd like to say that this Taylor says that this nationalism, creating kind of the border by the politician, is nothing but showing a kind of the jingoism, which is created a kind of the violence. There is no possible, that means, remedy to get out this kind of the sectarian attitude, and this is that would create a kind of the conflict of the civilization, obviously, and that's why he has said that there should be a kind of symbiosis of the cultures. That's why he has established Vishwa Bharati, Vishwa, that means the world, and India. So he is talking about this kind of the symbiosis of culture. That's why he has brought in the Raksha Bandhan or Rakhi Bandhan Utsav. And we know in Raiganj probably there is called the Milan Mela, where we find the communities belonging to the people belonging to both communities. They are just united, after a particular on a particular date in order to show their sympathy, their expression, their love for them. And that is obviously talking about the humanitarian aspects that has been lost, that has been completely lost in the maze of this kind of religious or identity in the religious polarization, I should say. So I should say that this kind of, that means the violent atmosphere should be stopped. And regarding the CA, NRC, I have also talked about that this is a debated concept, and we know that again that how again and again we should be much more anthropocentric. We should be much more, that means humanitarian in this particular concepts, so that there should not be, if we follow this kind of the humanitarian aspect, especially by not going to the legal aspects too much, rigorous legal aspects, I think there will be no problem to eradicate this kind of, this means, divisions. Right now, in the Tabishkar has also talked about that we are all strangers to all kind. We have also created a kind of the strangers. Say, for instance, Okonko, whenever British missionaries have come, Okonko appears them to be the strangers. That's why he has tried to kill them. So obviously here we find also if we are trying to, those who are coming from other places, we are condemning them as or deeming them as a kind of strangers, and obviously trying to rob of everything from them. So this should not be the case. It should be considered, it should be looked at from the humanistic or the anthropocentric angle, and then I think all problems will be solved. So that is the basic intention of my discussion, is that does border matter? So the border, which is talking about the order, so all this order and the border which has been manipulated, which is manipulative, and which has been created by those who are in power. So those we are belonging to literature, we should, by reading so many literatures of various cultures, so we should be much more broad. We should explore our own voices in this kind of legal aspects, and rather we should inculcate, that means a mentality of peace among the common people. There should not be any kind of any divisive politics between people and among the common people. We can create a kind of the world where everybody should live in a peaceful, that means, condition. And I think that will be the basic motto of our life. And so far as the partition literature is concerned, I think after reading this literature, we can get to realize how this writer continuously are trying to, that means, evaporate this kind of, that means, divisions. We know Kazi Nazrul says that Hindu na ora Muslim oi jigyashe konjon. So we know that again there is a kind of the religious bifurcations, and we have to dismantle this kind of bifurcations. We have to go by the singular ethics. That means that Shangat Chaddam Sangbadatam Sarvamanam Srijanatam. That means it's a kind of the unification of sensibility, unity, and that should be brought. That should be brought back. I think that is the basic motto of my discussion today. So that's it. That's it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Munshi. And what we missed at the beginning of the program can always be amended towards the end. And so I would call upon Professor Milan Mondol to kindly introduce Dr. Munshi to all our speakers.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Munshi, on my behalf for your valuable lectures. I think it's not necessary to introduce you right now, because you have already presented yourself through your lecture. Yet, for the sake of customary, I would like to introduce you. Sorry. So, Dr. Oritra Munshi is an assistant professor in the Department of English at Raiganj University. He is a co-editor of the volume Border and Bordering, Poetics, Politics and Precariousness, published in Ebidem Press 2020. His area of interest includes post-colonial literature, diaspora study, and subaltern studies. And once again, I would like to thank Professor Munshi for his valuable lecture, because it actually not only is enriching the students, or it not only has enriched the students, but also the scholars and the teachers like us. So now I'd like to hand it over the microphone to Professor Somadev Rai.
Thank you, Professor Mondol. Now, Dr. Munshi, would you like to have the questions, please?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I was actually putting forth quite a few. So what I do is I just tell you the question, the basic question, what I wanted to know was, like, when we look at partition literature as such, what we find that a lot more has been written in central and western India than when compared to Bangla literature, or even literature in English from the eastern side of the country. Now, and what I feel, there has been a very conscious silencing of truth. The religious bipolarity, which is a historical truth, it is not something which has just cropped up or which the English has imposed on us. From times immemorial, the religious bipolarity did exist in the country. Whereas people are trying to, I mean, there is a constant effort at shielding that religious bipolarity, negating the religious bipolarity under the garb of secularism. So the question is, and even when I was reading, I went into a lot of literature like this partition literature. This is something which interests me even personally. So what I found was most of the literature that even was written or recorded was, quite glossed over. The real pain, the real suffering, especially those of the subaltern classes who were almost the last to migrate, and who found themselves cooped up either in Mana camp or in Dondokaranno, and then Morijjapi followed. So nothing of that has been there in active literature. There is this total, especially with the Bengalis, I feel, there is this complete, an effort to just erase the memories of the collective pain and the loss of homeland, the unrootedness, the uprooting of a total culture. So even now, the Hindus, who are staying back there, they face a lot of problems in everyday life and the culture. Although we say that in West Bengal also we are Bengalis and there also they are Bengalis, but do you really think that Goshol and Nasta, these are words of Bengali everyday use, is not that an Arabization of Bengali? So under these circumstances, don't we find the literature, partition literature, lacking a great deal?
Lacking?
Lacking in all aspects. What is written is just the tip of the iceberg.
Okay, that means what is your exact question then?
My exact question is that, what do you feel can be done in this on this literary front? What is actually lacking? I would rather like you to pinpoint on it.
What is actually lacking in partition literature? You would like?
Yes.
This is what you actually want to mean.
Yes.
So I feel that what you have talked about so far as the language is concerned. So we know that there is a kind of the interactive sessions with the people, and they are very much imbibed by the culture where they were born. Because during partition, lots of people are coming from the Bangladesh to this particular culture, and often I have personally observed that my grandmothers, they are speaking the Bangladeshi languages. They are not conforming to the language which usually we speak. So they are again they are trying to retain their own particular cultural ethos. I think especially in the case of diaspora, that is also related to partition. And we know that how this diasporic sensibility is at work so far as this particular concept is concerned. Because we know lots of words, as you have mentioned, can be found which has been taken from that means the other culture, that means which has been taken from the Arabian literature at the same time. And I can remember there is a story whose name is Pother Kata, where it has again we find that there is a kind of, that means probably a kind of the Arabian language has been utilized. I have forgotten this word, probably Ashar or Ansar, ANSAR, Ansar. The language has been utilized. This is also a kind of the Arabic language. I think this is also a kind of the strategy of the writers, exactly like that of a way we find in the American writers. If you go by the Langston Hughes poem, we find that he has also utilized his own language. And this is nothing what is called, Spivak says, it's a kind of the strategic essentialism. I think they are very strategically trying to pour their own particular language in order to create the existence of their own, that particular culture. That means you need to understand, say for instance, if we utilize this particular Arabic word, I need to go through this particular Arabic word. So it is not that I will retain my own particular culture, but I have to, that means, go by the Arabian literature at the same time. Probably this is a kind of, that means the strategic representation, the strategic essentialism, I should say, which they are continuously trying to follow in order to validate their existence, especially in the realm of literature. So I feel that. So it's a kind of the strategy deployed by the writers. They are continuously trying to make. because they're trying to dismantle a kind of which earlier I also talked about, that distinction between the Commonwealth literature and the British literature. Lots of vernacular literatures. If I talk about the Bangladeshi literatures, lots of literatures are there. Not only the Bangladeshi literature, so many Tamil literatures, that means Afro-American literatures. There are lots of literature, Australian literature. So they must have obviously utilized their certain languages which a person belonging to the different community should go through, and it is nothing but a kind of the shoot strategy, that means as maintained by the writers, I think.
Thank you, Dr. Munshi. There are a couple of more questions in the in-call messages. I'll be reading them out. I find two from Rajesh Chaudhary. His first question is how partition and migration literature is related to each other, how migration in the novel The White Tiger by Arvind Ariga is affected by partition of India. And the second one is, what is the role of Nakshal movement, which is described in the novel There's Gunpowder in the Air by Manoranjan Bapari in Partition of India?
Okay. So the partition literature and the diaspora is very much associated. As I've mentioned, the certain stories in my discussions is where I'm trying to have mentioned the condition of the Lilia, that means as implemented by Jhumpa Lahiri. We know that how that lady belonging to the second generation immigrants, they are trying to look at the history from the diasporic angle, because diaspora is talking about the dislocation of culture, this displacement probably helping people to talk about the belatedness related to their, that means the culture of this particular root where he is actually or she is actually coming from. So from this particular angle, we know that partition is very much related to diaspora, because this homemaking, concept of homemaking, the refugee politics, whatever I have said or talked about, tried to focus on, is that they're very much rooted in the blood. That means this home is very much rooted in one's own blood, and that is probably actually help that particular person belonging to another, that means another culture, and he or she is trying to create her existence within the different culture by resorting to emotion or imagination, and that probably would create a kind of this home, and that probably help the kind of the bridge making that actually occurs between these two particular, that means concept, that means the diaspora and partition at the same time. And whenever you are talking about the Naxalite movement, obviously what you have referred to Gun Island, I should refer to in this particular connection Jhumpa Lahiri's that particular that means story, which is also associated with the Naxalite movement, and that means the lowland, where you can also find that this particular Naxalite movement has been given an importance, but that particular Naxalite revolution, and which is obviously creating a kind of the border, because on the one hand, so far as the Naxalite movement is concerned, on the one hand there is the state-sponsored machinery, that means the police, and other there are certain section of people who are just trying to go against this kind of state-sponsored mechanism. So there is a kind of, again, there is a kind of the polarization, there is a kind of the border being generated, and this is also created a kind of the border. And we find that how it has also created a kind of the violence in the entire society at the same time. So that is why it is, that is how it is related. Ma'am, you are not audible.
Yes, sorry, I didn't unmute. Thank you for pointing that out. And now that we have reached the final, okay, there is again another question by Rajesh Chaudhary before we give up. Yeah, I'll read the question. Yeah, it is how the lives of the Santals are affected by partition of India, and what is the impact in modern Indian novel like The Mysterious Ailment of Rupi Baske by Hasda Sauvendra Shekhar. Are they still afraid to come in the mainstream society?
I did not get you. Please, would you kindly repeat it?
Yeah. How the lives of Santals are affected by the partition. Santals, yeah, are affected by the partition of India? And what is the impact in modern Indian novel like The Mysterious Ailment of Rupi Baske by Hasda Sovendra Shekhar? Are they still afraid to come in the mainstream of society?
So the novels which you have referred to, I haven't read these novels. So in this particular connection, I'm able to give your answer in this connection because I haven't read the novels you have mentioned. So sorry for these things. I have to read, then I'll be able to give this answer. I haven't read this novel, so it is not possible for me to give you answer.
Yes, and here we have Manoj Bari, Professor Manoj Bari from our department asking, how does partition or border of states in a country affect culture? Does it affect the same way as partition between countries?
Yeah, because this partition obviously matters. It actually creating a kind of that means the violence not among the people, but between the countries at the same time. Because in the case of that means America, we know the other countries we know that how there is a kind of the differences are there. How there are the strategies being implemented by that means this kind of the border and this they've been made by this border, and there are so many strategies are there, and how it has also made an impact on this man capital flow, I think. So to that how peoples are also coming into that means, and get to realize that how certain peoples are migrating to other countries, and but by according to their own wings, and they are considered as the cyber police, and they're going to other cultures in order to create their existence by pursuing their degrees or so other things in order to make them economically developed. So this is the problem. Is first thing is this migration or this partition, or the migration is the first problem. Is that this is what is called the brain drain that is happening in the South Asian diaspora especially. But whenever we are talking about this migration, that means the partition, so it has created a kind of the religious bifurcation, and this partition has made impact on the in so many ways. Because I have also talked about by bringing in Sanana Jahanara Kavi that this partition happened long ago, but there are so many partitions are happening. And we know with what kind of partitions happening, there are gender issues, racial issues, social problems. So many issues are there coming from this kind of that means determinants coming from the society, and all these determinants are incumbent upon the that means the common peoples, and they are just getting segregated. So it has impacted a lot upon the mind of the common people, and that's why we that destroy this kind of political social border, and they are more concerned about the anthropocentric aspects of the life. So that has made a direct impact on the minds of the people as well. After the partition will happen, still it is happening here and there. If you read Tavish's The New Xenophobia, your concept will be much more clear. How if the xenophobia is not limited only to racism, but sexism is also there, and the caste culture and creed. So this capitalism has taken a very important role nowadays to create a kind of the slaves. So we can get to realize this is a kind of the domination in a different format that is going on, and it also happened through the partition. So partitions here can be found in a numerous way that has impact that has made an impact on the people in so many ways. So that is the thing.
Ma'am, are you getting me? Are you getting me? Please, next question. Go to the next
Yeah, sorry
question,
again,
ma'am.
I had not unmuted myself. Now, my laptop has certain problems. So this is again another problem we are having with the phone, constantly switching from or switching over, and I'm forgetting to unmute. Yeah. Professor Milan Mondol, he wants to know, how is Vijay Mishra's idea of impossible morning related to partition angst?
Right, with good questions. So, if we just try to look at partition from the psychoanalytic perspective, so I think Vijay Mishra is very much influenced by Freud and Lacan at the same time, we find that I would like to focus on this question from the Lacanian perspective. I think that would make you sense regarding the question which you have made. So we find that Lacan has talked about three stages. One is imaginary stage, and on the other hand is that the symbolic stage, and last one is the real. And this imaginative state, that means the stage is imaginative condition, is actually referring to the pre-linguistic stage. And symbolic stage is talking about the language. And we know that between the symbolic stage and this imaginary stage, there is a stage which is called the mirror stage, where the child is continuously trying to identify himself. In the pre-linguistic stage, he doesn't have any idea about anything. What does it signify? Say, for instance, what does father, mother, and others signify? He doesn't have any idea about that. But in symbolic stage, his ego development has started. He's trying to identify himself. And in symbolic stage, that is what is called the linguistic stage. And we know that linguistic stage is actually talking about the child's displacement from his mother figure, and he has entered into the harsh, realistic aspects of life in the society. That means he has been taught, he's continuously been taught who is father, who is mother, what are the differences, that means the scene, what are the good things that are being inculcated in the minds of that particular person. That means that particular child who is developing. And then his ego has actually developed in the maze of the societal language. And he is bound to express his own emotions within the purview of this kind of language, which Ferdinand de Saussure has talked about, that lang and parole. That means the language which has already been given. You have to express yourself or your experiences with the life through the language given, which Ferdinand de Saussure says. And on the other hand, we know your own emotion and expressions, which is barely possible to express that particular language. Whenever it is barely possible to express the language already given, then that emotion and expression is getting repressed at the back of your life. So that particular repression is trying to make him alienated from the mainstream of your life. So on the one hand, the child is trying to identify himself with the societal desire. On the other hand, the unexpressed areas, that unexpressed desire, which is very much repressed in his or her mind, that particular repression probably helps him to make herself alienated. So one thing is identification, another is the alienation. And it is said that this is somehow talking about a kind of the big other. Music says that this is what is called big other, because the society is appearing in front of us as a kind of big other, because the language which is coming from the society is nothing but a kind of the institutionalization. This is a kind of the institution. Probably you have your own driving license, you are liable to, that means, drive your car. Those who don't have that kind of license, they won't be able to, that means, drive. So it's a kind of the institution. Through this language you have to express. So it has been said that this language is actually splitting the human existence in so many divisions. So now my question is, impossible, that means mourning, which we have talked about, that probably mourning and melancholia, if you read, then you can get to realize that how it comes that repression which I have referred to in this particular connection, it happens in the case of partition. I'm giving one example. When Tridit was murdered by means of this kind of the communal frenzy, that what happens, the Rabi, the another character, he was very much influenced that particular incident. And that particular incident is very much embedded in his subconscious or unconscious mind. And that probably haunted him a lot. That repression which what he had seen, he won't be able to express it. The very moment he has seen that a person has killed a particular, that means a person who is very close to your heart, that very moment, that person, Rabi, was very much affected by this incident, and he has to go through a kind of the schizophrenic state, and he had to repress that emotion at the back of his mind during that particular time. And that repression that means so the impossible desire, that means impossible mourning. You will say that mourning, that means that absence, that is actually coming whenever he is in his solitary mode. As I've said, that repression is coming as a kind of the return of the repressed in order to traumatize his own existence through various things, through any sorts of any metaphors. You know that by observing pagris, so many people can associate that this pagris probably is reminding that particular victim that kind of violence. Probably through any kind of any metaphor, but through any kind of any things, you are trying to ruminate the things which already actually happened. So this case, this impossible mourning is something that means which you can mourn. You can mourn, but that is yet to be made possible, because this is impossible. This is an impossible. That means if you can lament for your lost home, but that home cannot bring back. It is not possible. It's feasible in the practical sense. But by means of your own imagination, you can have that. So that loss. So Freud says that you can think of the lost object. You can think of the lost object. One word more I would like to say in this connection is that if you read the story, A Task of a Translator, you can get to realize an example has been given in this connection, that if you feel that there is a kind of the vessel, okay, that vessel has fallen apart, we know each and every particles which are associated with the construction of the vessels, we find that each and every particle is bearing the imprint of, or bearing the absence of, the entire vessel. So each and every particle is nothing but the fragmentations of particular own individuals, and they even feel the sense of loss. So impossible mourning is that you are just trying to translate yourself in different culture, and you are not able to, that means you are not able to feel the completeness of that particular object. And that lack and lacuna is probably haunting you again and again. That is why it says that impossible mourning. That means you can mourn, but it is not possible to have it. And that is coming from this kind of loss. And so that is why your consciousness should be coming from this lost object. That is what Freud has also talked about. And this lost object somehow is related to the formulation of this impossible mourning, which Vijay Mishra has talked about. And that's why Vijay Mishra says that all diasporas are unhappy, each and every diaspora is unhappy in its own way. Because this is the individual, that means individual characters he is talking about, those who have been suffering from this kind of crisis. Because it acts in your own psychology that all this loss is working in the individuals, human individuals, separately. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir. Actually, frankly speaking, the more I am listening to you, the more I am becoming your fan, sir. Okay, so Professor Devbrai, it's your turn.
Thank you, Professor Mondal. Now that we have reached the final lap of this 4-day mega lecture series, we had the chance to participate and listen to 5 wonderful, absolutely gorgeous oratory by our respected professors and eminent peers. We thank you all from the bottom of our hearts. The intellectual time travel has spanned from the ancient classics right up to the post-human existence, a world where humans are not the sole deciding factors. Words fall short in expressing our gratitude towards Professor Debnarayan Bandyopadhyay, Professor Ranjan Ghosh, Professor Shubhendu Das, Professor Gautam Ghoshal, and Professor Oritra Munshi for this more than brilliant experience. I thank our respected principal, who has remained a constant inspiration for everything we do. He has remained our support whenever any of us in the college attempt at anything. I thank the college IQAC for being with us all through. Our colleagues from the Technology Subcommittee has always been the central staff supporting the whole program. Without their active help and support, the virtual platform wouldn't have been possible, along with the very complex nitty-gritties. I thank all our staff members and our colleagues for always being with us, our audience on YouTube, and participants on this platform, without whom this program would have become meaningless. Last but not the least, we thank you, dear students. Whatever we do, we always have your interests as our priority. It was this love for you that helped us launch such an ambitious program spanning through 5 lectures and through 4 days. Thank you, everyone. Thank you again.
Welcome, ma'am.
So I think with that, we have really reached the end of the program. Thank you, Dr. Munshi, once again.
Thank
It
you.
was really, your presence was very brilliant as such. And I like that electric blue on you. It was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your compliment. Thank you.
So I'm leaving the meeting now. I'm closing the meeting.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay, should I leave then, Milan?
Yeah, obviously, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.